Some men do not knock. They arrive like a verdict. It came at dusk, long, black, quiet as a held breath. It stopped outside a small house at the edge of town, the kind of house that asked for nothing and the street believed had nothing to hide. Two men stepped out first. They said nothing. They were the kind of silence that has been trained into shape. Then he came. Huan Hun. In this city, not knowing that name meant you were lucky. He stood a moment and looked at the door. Men like him do not look at doors. Doors open for them. People open for them. The whole world has a habit of stepping aside. Tonight, he had come to take the girl. That was the order in his own head. Simple, settled, a standing vow marked to his name, tied to a family at the edge of town, and he had come to collect the one thing that vow was owed. He did not know her face yet. He only knew he would leave with her. Inside the house, that girl felt something before she heard it, a pressure, a wrongness, the sense that the evening had just changed shape. She did not know the most dangerous man in the city had come to take her. And he did not know that in a few short minutes he would stand on her porch and forget how to breathe. The girl's name was Mary. She was ordinary in the most beautiful way. She woke early. She made the bed even when no one would see it. She worked at a small shop in town, the sort of place where everyone knows your name. She laughed easily. She trusted easily. She had a private rule she had never once doubted. Good people always tell the truth. That rule was a gift from her mother, a childhood with no shadows in it. And her mother was something else. Elizabeth Power, warm voice, gentle hands. She could calm a crying child or a shaking neighbor with one look. But there were things about Elizabeth that did not match this quiet life. She always sat facing the door. She always knew who was lying before the sentence ended. She never raised her voice, and somehow no one ever raised theirs to her. There are people who love us completely and tell us almost nothing, whose silence is a room we are never allowed to enter. Elizabeth was one of those people. She loved her daughter more than her own breath, and she had spent years praying the past would never find the door. Tonight, the past parked outside it. Meet him as his men knew him. Huan Hun did not shout, he did not threaten, he did not need to. When he entered a room, the room rearranged itself around him. Conversations ended, hands went still. Grown men checked their posture like boys before a teacher. He had built something in this city, something with rules and reach. He ruled it the way winter rules a field, completely, coldly, without apology. People feared his anger. The ones who truly knew him feared his calm, because his calm meant he had already decided. And tonight, he had decided. The vow would be settled. The girl would come into his protection, out of reach of the deaths and enemies that circled anyone marked by his world. He told himself it was duty. He was very good at telling himself things. Across the city, in a low room, another man was already moving. His name was Dohan. He had stood at Huan Hun's shoulder for years, close enough to taste the power and never hold it. Once, Huan Hun had chosen another man over him for a seat that should have been his, made him kneel, made him smile while he did it. Dohan had never forgotten how small that smile felt. Word reached Dohan now, and his eyes sharpened. "The boss went alone," a man told him. "He never goes alone," Dohan said. A pause. "Follow him," Dohan said, quietly, "and tell me everything." So the danger was already moving before the first word was ever spoken at the door.
The knock did not come like a request. It came like an announcement. Mary reached the door first. Her mother was in the back, humming low. Mary opened it without fear. She had never learned fear. A man stood there, tall, still, dressed like money that does not need to prove itself. "Good evening," he said. The voice was even, almost gentle, the gentleness of a blade laid flat. Something cool moved down Mary's spine. She could not name it. She smiled anyway, because that was who she was. "Can I help you?" she asked. He looked at her a moment too long. This was the face he had come for. He felt no hesitation, only the cold arithmetic of a task. "I am here," he said, "for the woman of the house." Mary's smile slowed. "There is only us," she said, "my mother and me." "Then call her," he said, almost kindly. The kindness was the worst part. From the back of the house a voice answered, "Mary, who is it?" Footsteps, soft, unhurried. Elizabeth stepped into the doorway, and the world stopped. Huan Hun looked at her, and everything he had built around himself fell away in a single breath. The cold, the control, the task he had walked in certain of. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His chest did not rise. The absolute stillness in him cracked, and for one long moment, the most dangerous man in the city was simply a man who had seen a ghost. He had come to take a daughter. He had not known whose. Elizabeth went pale, not with fear, with memory. She had known that face long before Mary was born. She had spent years hoping she never would again. He said her name, not the name on the door, an older name, a name she had buried. He said it the way you say a word that costs you something, slow, cracked at the edge. Mary stood between them, looking from one to the other, watching two strangers who were plainly not strangers at all. Who is this man, and why is my mother looking at him like something she once loved and once survived? The night held still.
They sat eventually. Even ghosts get tired of standing. Mary poured tea no one drank. Her hands needed something to do. Her mind would not be quiet. They did not talk like people who had just met. They talked like people interrupted mid-sentence years ago and only now finishing it. "I spent years burying you," he said, low. "Somehow you kept coming back alive." "I had to disappear," Elizabeth answered. "If I had stayed, the dark would have stayed with me, and it would have found her." He glanced at Mary, then away. "That is all the past you need for now. The rest was in the room, in the weight between them, in the way two careful people sat very straight so they would not lean toward each other." Once, without meaning to, his eyes moved over her face, the way a man rereads a letter he already knows by heart. She caught it. She looked down at her tea. Neither said a word. The two silent men stood by the wall. Even they were uneasy. They had never seen their boss like this, soft at the edges, human. It frightened them more than any rage. One of them shifted his weight, and Huan Hun's eyes cut to him. A single look. The man went still as stone. But the damage was done. The men had seen it. Their king had a weakness, and the weakness had a face, and the face was pouring tea at a small table at the edge of town. In that world, a weakness that can be seen is a weakness that will be used.
That night, no one in the house slept. Mary lay in the dark and listened to the voices rise and fall below her like a tide she could not read. She thought of every locked door her mother checked twice, every phone call answered with her back already turned. She had thought it was just how her mother was. Now she understood it was a watch, a guard kept every single night for years over a daughter who never knew she was being guarded. Downstairs, the gloves came off. "You have no right," Elizabeth said. Her voice was low and sharp as winter glass. "No right to walk into the one clean thing I built." "Clean?" he repeated, bitter. "You were never clean, Elizabeth. Neither of us was. We were just good at the dark." "I left the dark." "No one leaves," he said. "They just stop looking behind them. You, of all people, know that." She did. That was the worst part. Years she had faced the door, so the door could never surprise her. And still, when his face appeared, it took the breath from her too. "Why come yourself?" she asked. "You always send men." He was quiet a moment. Then, "Every city I entered, I looked for your eyes before I looked for my enemies." Neither of them moved. The space between his hand and hers on the table was the width of a single honest word, and neither of them was brave enough to close it. Two people who had buried something alive and called it dead, and found tonight that it had only been holding its breath. By morning, the danger had a name and a face. Dohan did not wait long. He came to Juan himself in a cold room between places and laid the truth down like a blade on a table. "People are talking," Dohan said. "They say the king went soft over a woman at the edge of town. They say she has a leash on you now." Juan did not answer. "I can make the talk stop," Dohan said, his voice smooth as oil. "Finish what you came to finish. Settle the old matter. Walk away clean. Be the man we followed." "And if I do not?" Juan said. Dohan smiled. "Then the talk becomes action, and action does not ask your permission." He left, but he left something behind. That afternoon, Elizabeth walked past the side window and went cold. A man stood across the road, too still, pretending to be no one. She did not point. She did not gasp. She simply moved Mary away from the glass with one calm hand and said low, "We are being watched." Juan stepped to the window and saw the same thing she had. His own people, turned now on him and on her and on the girl. "I brought this here," he said. The words tasted like iron. "Yes," Elizabeth said, "you did." But she did not say it like an accusation. She said it like a soldier reading a map, already thinking, already 3 steps ahead. The old self awaking inside her, stretching, remembering what it was for. That night, the watcher leaned too close to the back fence to hear. A board creaked under his weight. Elizabeth was at the door before he could move, and the man melted into the dark, knowing he had been caught. A small thing, but the line had been drawn now, in the dirt by the fence.
The next morning, Mary came down the stairs, folded her arms, and said the bravest thing a frightened girl can say. "Tell me the truth." The room went quiet. "I am not a child," Mary said. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "Men are watching this house. You two speak in a language I do not know, And he looks at me like he knows something about my own life that I do not. So tell me, what is happening to my family?" Elizabeth opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time in years, she did not have a gentle answer ready. It was Huan Hun who spoke. "Sit down," he said. Not a command, almost a request. "There is something you deserve to know." And Mary, who had never feared a stranger in her life, sat across from the most feared man in the city. For the first time, she felt the cold he carried. But she felt something else under it too, a strange, careful, hidden care. "What am I to him?" she thought. "What is this thread that ties the three of us together?"
Here is the truth he came to settle. The old matter was never about money. It was never about territory. It was a promise to protect. Years ago, on the worst night of her old life, Elizabeth knew she had to vanish. She could not ask Huan Hun directly. If she had spoken to him face to face, he would have followed her into the dark and dragged the dark behind him. So she did the only thing her world allowed. She sent it through a proxy. A coded word passed down a chain of people who never knew the whole shape of it. A standing vow marked to Huan Hun's name. If a certain woman ever went silent, whatever she left behind was to be kept from harm. No name, no face, only the mark and the word. He had carried that vow for years without knowing whose it was. He only knew he was bound to it. When the chain finally led him to this house, to this name, he expected a stranger, an obligation, a simple thing to close. Instead, he found her, and the girl who turned out to be the very thing he had sworn his life to keep safe. There was a shadow under Elizabeth's voice as she spoke, and Mary heard it. "You are not the only thing I hid to keep you safe," Elizabeth said quietly. "There was someone else once, someone I lost so that you could live without the dark ever knowing your name." She pressed her hand flat on the table, steadying it. "I made my peace with that grief a long time ago, but it lives in me. It always will." Mary reached across and covered her mother's hand, and for a moment the two of them simply sat with the weight of a loss Mary had never known she was carried by. What looked like a threat at the door was a guardian who never knew what he was guarding. What looked like danger arriving was protection coming home, years too late. "You knew," Mary whispered. "You knew someone might come." "I hoped no one would," Elizabeth said quietly. "But yes, I built our whole quiet life so that if they ever did, you would be ready, even if you never knew why." And outside, in the cold, the lights in the windows were counted by men who had already decided. Now the air turns tight. Do-han moved, and when he moved, he showed his teeth. He did not just threaten anymore. He had been ahead the whole time. He found Huan Hun once more, and this time he was smiling before he spoke. "You think I just learned about the woman," Do-han said. He shook his head slow. "I knew about her before you did. The old vow, the chain, the mark. I am the one who made sure the word finally reached you. I sent you to that house." Huan Hun went very still. "I knew you would choose her," Do-han said. "That is the whole point. A king who keeps his rule never gives me the crown. A king who throws it away for a woman hands it to me himself." And then Do-han showed that this was more than talk. While the family slept the night before, his people had already moved. The quiet network Elizabeth had spent 20 years building, the old names who went silent and loyal at the sound of her voice, Do-han had reached them first.
One by one, he had turned them, or frightened them, or simply bought the debt out from under her. By the time the sun rose, Elizabeth's safety net was his. She learned it that morning. She made the calls she had saved for the worst day, and one after another, the lines went dead or answered in the wrong voice. Her whole hidden defense gone, cut out from under her before she even knew the knife was moving. For the first time, Huan Hun watched her go pale in a way that had nothing to do with memory. "He has my people," she said quietly. "All of them. I built that for 20 years. He took it in a night." Dohan had won something real. Not a threat, a victory. He had stripped the most dangerous woman in the city down to the 4 walls of a small house and the 2 people standing in it. Protect them and lose everything. Walk away and feed them to him. Either way, Dohan had already collected his first prize. He had thought of every move. He had thought of everything except what the vow actually was.
That night, Elizabeth did not sleep, and for once she did not pretend to. Mary found her mother in the dark kitchen, sitting very still, hands flat on the table, as if she were holding it down. And then, without a sound at first, Elizabeth's shoulders began to shake. 20 years of control, and it broke all at once. "I did everything right," she said, and her voice was not the calm winter glass anymore. It cracked straight through. "I gave up my name. I gave up the one before you. I built walls no one could see, and I kept them standing every night while you slept, so that you would never once be afraid. And he walked in and took it in a night. Every wall, every promise I made to keep you safe, gone." Mary had never seen her mother cry, not once in her whole life. It frightened her more than any of the men outside. "I am so tired," Elizabeth whispered. "I have been afraid for 20 years, and I never let you see it, not one day, and I am so tired of being the only one holding the door." And Mary did the thing her mother had done for her 10,000 times and never once received. She knelt down and put her arms around her and held her and said nothing at all, because some griefs do not want to be answered. They only want to be witnessed. "You do not have to hold it alone anymore," Mary said finally. "I am here now. I am not a child you have to protect. I am your daughter, and I am staying on this side of the door with you." Elizabeth held on to her, like someone who had been drowning quietly for 2 decades, and only now let herself be pulled up. In the next room, Huan Hun stood in the dark and heard all of it, and something in him that had been frozen for 20 years finished breaking too.
They came when the watching stopped and the moving began. Dohan did not send the men this time. He came with them. He wanted to see it. He wanted to be the one standing in the wreckage of the king's last mistake. The first knock was soft, polite even, danger that knocks like a neighbor. Then the door gave and the cold came in. The plan was simple. Mary stays behind the inner wall. She promised. She meant it. Some promises break the moment love is tested. The first man through reached for Elizabeth out of the dark. He never touched her. Elizabeth stepped into his blind spot the way water steps around a stone. She caught his wrist, turned it past where a wrist is meant to go, and the man folded with a sound he could not finish. She took the blade from his belt before his knees hit the floor and set him down almost gently, the way you set down something you are done with. A second man came fast behind the first. Huan Hun met him in the narrow hall, and the fight there was short and ugly and quiet.
two men who both knew exactly how this is done. Huan Hun ended it and did not look back. And then a third slipped wide, past both of them, toward the inner wall, toward the woman who had raised her. Mary did not freeze for half a second. She froze for 3 long seconds, and inside them a whole life turned over. She heard her own heart slam. She felt her legs refuse. She saw the man's hand reaching for her mother's shoulder, and she saw at once every locked door and every quiet sacrifice and every truth her mother had swallowed to keep her safe. The girl who believed good people always tell the truth understood in that frozen breath that some love is louder than any word, and that it was her turn to be the one who protects. Her hand found the heavy teapot on the side table, still hot. She did not think. She swung with everything 18 quiet years had stored in her. The pot caught the man across the back of the skull and shattered, and he went down in a spray of porcelain and steam. And Mary stood over him shaking, no longer a girl who feared nothing because she knew nothing, but a woman who had looked at the dark and refused to step aside. Across the room, Elizabeth turned, saw, and something in her face broke open with pride and grief all at once. Then a single voice, calm, cut through the room. "Enough," Dohan said. He stood in the doorway now. He held no blade at all. He held something worse, a single folded paper, old, soft at the creases, and he was smiling like a man who had saved his real move for last.
"Put down whatever is in your hands," Dohan said. "All of you. You will want to hear this standing still." He lifted the old paper. "You spent all night guarding the wrong secret," he said to the room. He looked at Huan Hun. "You think the vow was hers." He looked at Elizabeth. "You think you sent it." He shook his head, slow and pleased. "You sent a word down a chain, but the chain did not start with you, Elizabeth. It started with the one you lost, the child before this one." Elizabeth went still in a way Mary had never seen. "The vow was never yours to give," Dohan said. "It was his. Your first child lived. I have him. I have had him for a very long time, and the mark Huan Hun carried all these years, the one he thought bound him to a stranger, was signed in that child's name, not yours. He was never sent here to protect the daughter. He was sent by a promise made to the son, a son who has spent his whole life believing you left him behind on purpose." The room did not breathe. "And here is my offer," Dohan said, gentle now, which was the cruelest thing of all. "I will give you back the child you lost, alive, whole, standing in front of you within the hour. All 3 of you can have the thing you each thought was gone forever." He let it sit. "Or," he said, "you keep this one, the girl with the teapot, but not both. The son comes home only if the king kneels, signs me everything, and this house and everyone in it disappears quietly by morning. The daughter for the son, the living child you have for the living child you lost. Choose." It was not a blade to the throat. It was worse. It was the one wound none of them had armor for. Elizabeth looked at the daughter she had raised, then at the door, beyond which somehow breathed the child she had grieved for 20 years. 2 children, 1 mother, and a man offering to trade one piece of her heart for the other. "Do not," Mary whispered. "Mama, look at me. Whatever he is offering, it is a trap wearing my brother's face. He is not giving you a son. He is taking a daughter. Do not let him make you choose. That is the whole game."
And Elizabeth, who had never in 20 years shown these men single crack, made her choice out loud, and it was not the choice Dohan had built his whole plan around. "I already lost one child to that world," she said, and her voice was steady again, steady in the way of something that has finished breaking and become iron. "I will not buy him back by feeding it another. If my son is alive, then he is alive because a part of him is mine, and the part of me that is in him would never, ever ask his mother to sell his sister to hold him." She stepped forward. "You do not understand us at all, Dohan. You think love can be traded like territory. It is the one thing you never learned to hold, and it is the reason you will always lose."
Dohan's smile finally died. He had built a machine out of everyone's worst fear, and Elizabeth had simply refused to be afraid of the right thing at the right time. A trap only closes on someone who reaches into it. She did not reach. But Juan did. He stepped forward, past Elizabeth, into the center of the room, and he did the thing that men in that city would tell for years after. "You want a king to kneel?" he said. "I will kneel." He went down slowly, on one knee, hands empty and open. "But not for the trade," he said. "I sign you nothing. I sell you no one." He looked up. "I kneel because I finally understand what I have been for 20 years, a blade that thought it was a man. I carried a vow to a child I never met and told myself it was duty, because duty was the only shape love was allowed to take in me." He looked at Elizabeth, then at Mary. "It was never duty, it was the only piece of her I was allowed to keep, and I will not hand it to you." Then, quiet. "If my son is out there, Dohan, I will find him myself, not on your terms, not for your price. And when I do, the first thing I will tell him is the truth, that his mother never left him, that she has grieved him every day of her life. You wanted to sell him that lie. I would burn everything I ever built before I let you." And there, in the moment Dohan's whole plan hung on someone flinching, no one did. Not the mother, not the king on his knee, not the girl with porcelain at her feet. That was the opening. Elizabeth had circled wide while every eye was on the kneeling king. She closed the last of the distance before Dohan registered it and put him on the floor with the cold efficiency of a woman who had done this in another life and never forgotten how. His folded paper fell from his hand. Mary caught it before it touched the ground. "If you came to end this family," Elizabeth said, low, looking down at him, "you should never have told me my son was alive. You gave me the one reason in the world I will never stop fighting." Dohan looked up at the two of them, the woman and the kneeling king, and understood at last that he had spent the whole game studying people who could not be bought, and this, and not any blade, was the thing that beat him. The danger settled, like a storm settles, not all at once, in pieces, in quiet. Dohan was finished, not by force in the end, but by being seen for what he was, a man who thought love was a currency, in a room full of people to whom it was the one thing beyond price. Juan stripped him of every ally with a few quiet words to the right people, and took back, name by name, the network Dohan had stolen from Elizabeth in the dark. The watching stopped. The cold pulled back from the windows, and the small house at the edge of town was quiet again. But it was a different quiet now. Mary sat at the table with the old folded paper in front of her. Inside it, a name, a brother, a thread out into the world that had not been cut after all. "I used to think good people always tell the truth,"
she said softly. I thought secrets were a kind of lie. She looked at her mother. But you kept 100 secrets so that I could grow up without a single fear. And you carried a grief for 20 years and never once let it touch me. The deepest love I have ever seen is the love you never let me notice. Elizabeth reached across and took her daughter's hands. Every single day, she said. We are going to find him, Mary said. It was not a question. My brother, we are going to find him, and you are going to get to stop grieving someone who is still alive. Elizabeth looked at her daughter, this girl who had walked into the dark and refused to step aside. And for the first time in 20 years, she let herself believe a door could open instead of only needing to be guarded.
And then there was him. Juan Hun stood in the doorway he had once filled like a verdict. He did not look like a king now. He looked like a man holding 2 empty hands and finally unafraid of them. Elizabeth walked him out into the cool evening. What happens now? She asked. I do not know, he admitted, and the admission cost him. I have spent my whole life knowing the next move. With you, I never did. Maybe that is why I never let you go, even when you were gone. We are not soft people, she said. We do not get easy endings. No, he agreed. Then, simpler. But I am not leaving this city, and I am not leaving this street. I came to this door to take something from you. He looked back at the house, at the warm light, at the girl inside it. I would like to spend what is left of my life giving it back instead, starting with finding your son, ours to answer for, both of us, and starting with dinner tomorrow if the door opens. She did not take his hand at first. She looked at him a long moment, this man she had buried and survived and never quite stopped loving. Then she reached out, slow, and closed the space that had sat between their hands for 20 years and held it. The door opens, she said. He came to that house to take her daughter. He left it having given away the one thing he was sure of and found, on a small porch at the edge of town, a family with one chair still empty and the first real reason he had ever had to fill it. Some men do not knock. They arrive like a verdict. And once in a long while, the verdict is mercy. The end.